The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. It is the foundation and the source of legal authority underlying the existence of the United States, and it is the authority of the federal government of the United States. It provides the framework for the organization of the U.S. government. There are basic principles to the United States Constitution. The first basic principle to the United States Constitution is popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty means that the government has to get the approval of the people before it does anything. Yes, do you have a question? The question is, what are some ways that everyday people practice popular sovereignty with the government? One example of the way that we practice popular sovereignty with the government is by voting. We have to vote representatives to represent us in government. Another principle is limited government. Limited government means that the government can't be too powerful, and it can only do things that we give it permission to do. Another principle is separation of powers. With separation of powers, that means that you have different branches of government. That way one doesn't become too strong. And so you'd have the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. And these three branches would use checks and balances. They would use checks and balances to make sure that not one branch would become too strong. And another principle would be federalism. Federalism is the division of power between the national and the state government. So the national government is stronger than the state government because it's at the federal level. So that's the way it is right now. With checks and balances, again, that's between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Yes, you have a question? The question is, do we still use checks and balances today? Yes, we still use checks and balances today. One way that we still use checks and balances is with the President and the Congress. The President can use a veto to veto a bill from Congress. So that's one way that we still use it today. Some background on the U.S. Constitution. James Madison is considered the father of the U.S. Constitution. And he was important because he introduced the Virginia Plan, the Bill of Rights, and the separation of powers. With the Virginia Plan was to help bigger states. States that had bigger populations, the Virginia Plan would give them some power. Yes, do you have a question? The question is, what kind of rights does the Bill of Rights give us? The Bill of Rights gives us rights such as the right to bear arms, and it also gives us the right to practice whatever religion we want. An example of the right to bear arms would be getting a license to carry a firearm. Why was the Constitution written? The Constitution was written as a reaction to the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation created a government that was extremely weak at the federal level. It had a weak central government, so the states had a lot of power. One example of that was with George Washington trying to stop a rebellion, and he couldn't do it because he didn't have enough power at the federal level, and so the president couldn't stop a rebellion. Also, Congress did not have the power to tax, so if the nation needed money to pay back debts in Europe for the Revolutionary War, it couldn't do that. Another reason that the Articles of Confederation was bad and the U.S. Constitution had to replace it was because in order for anything to get done, all 13 states had to approve any changes made in the Articles of Confederation. So it took forever to get anything done with that power. Also, for any laws to get passed, 9 out of the 13 colonies would have to approve it. So a lot of the times, nothing would get done. No laws would get passed because at least 9 colonies had to pass laws. The last reason was because states, Congress didn't have enough power to tell states how to pay for things from other countries. So if we wanted to trade things with Europe, we couldn't do it because the states wouldn't pay for anything that we bought from Europe. Another reason that it was written was over Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion was a bunch of farmers in Massachusetts who rebelled against the U.S. government because they didn't want to pay taxes. And we couldn't stop the rebellion fast enough because the president didn't have enough power. So in the Constitution, we addressed that and made the president have more power. So now instead of the states having a lot of power, the federal government has more power. We have a much stronger central government now. So now the federal government is at the highest level and the state government is lower. Another reason it was written was because of the separation of powers. We didn't have any separation of powers, so the legislature had all the power. And the U.S. Constitution was written in Philadelphia, and the point was to replace the Articles of Confederation. So you had the Articles of Confederation before, and you brought the U.S. Constitution to replace the Articles of Confederation. So we got rid of the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution would become the new law of the land. And we ended up replacing the Articles and making a new government. And whenever we made the new Constitution, we made it at the Constitutional Convention, and that was on May 25th through September 1787.